Okay, we are
I
recording.
get more light.
Sure. So, welcome once again to the Rugby Codebreakers. This is episode 3. Maybe you're beginning to get used to us by now.
Maybe we're starting to get used to this. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. So once again, I'll introduce my co-host, the Bertie Worcester to my Jeeves, perhaps, Lawrence.
That's all too fair a comparison, damn it. I nearly just added it along to
that. And of course, I am Martin, and not Jeeves. Well, I think, like all of us, I kind of aspire to Jeeves.
Yeah, weird.
So, a huge amount to cover since our last episode. As we said, we'd be recording this episode after the semi-finals of the Rugby League World Cup had concluded. We've also had the final of the Rugby Union Women's World Cup, and it's been all go, not to mention a whole plethora of autumn internationals. So there is plenty to talk about. But first thing I have to do is make my confession. I am very, very, very sorry to every England Rugby League fan. I did go to the semi-final on Saturday when England lost to Samoa, and I have just realised that England have never won a World Cup match that I've attended. So yes, it is my fault, and deep apologies to Sean Wayne, Sam Tompkins, all the players and all the other fans. I won't do it again.
And likewise, I need to offer my apologies to the Scotland Rugby Union side for tuning into their match, and within seconds of which the All Blacks were ahead and a man up. So, my bad. Very sorry.
Yeah.
Should have known better.
So there you go. We didn't mean it, but we've learned our lesson until the next time.
Yeah.
But speaking of Scotland, you've got to say, I think, to be honest, obviously they're gutted not to have taken that opportunity to beat the All Blacks and get what would have been an absolutely huge win. But still, I think it's got to go down as an encouraging performance. I know they don't want more, they want results rather than more encouraging performances. But,
I have seen pundits who have described it as a missed opportunity, that New Zealand were there for the taking at about 55 minutes, and then it all went badly sideways.
Yeah.
I believe there was a moment with Hogg held up just in front of the line. Could have offloaded, should have offloaded, took contact, tried to recycle the ball, and the moment passed. That could have put them, I think, 3 scores up.
Yeah, it's tough because, opportunities to get a victory against the All Blacks do not come around very often. If we look at what the All Blacks had done to Wales just the week before, 55 points, was it?
It was, yeah. But I said that whilst I was watching the match, that the Welsh skipped 50 points. We're counting ourselves unlucky. That's definitely progress for Scotland. And the other thing we were talking about recently as well, Finn Russell straight back in. Scotland looked a lot better, a lot more dangerous.
Yes, I think that's he's done himself no harm whatsoever, has he? Because, after the disappointment of not beating Australia, that was a big question as would it have been different if Finn Russell had played? As you say, he's come back in, and they've given an almighty scare to the arguably the top side on the planet.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the English will not thank us for that.
No, because oddly enough, when you say there for the taking, that is exactly what Eddie Jones just said about the All Blacks, that they are there for the taking. But you think, well, they've just had a big wake-up call.
How often do they have 2 bad games in a row?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. What is essential, though, for Scotland is in this autumn series now is they have to beat Argentina. They've got to get a good victory out of this series because it must just be so infuriating for everyone involved in Scotland and the fans to keep seeing near misses and defeats that show progress, but the progress never seems to get translated into victories.
Scotland appear to be a team that always go half the distance each time.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got Six Nations not too far away now.
Yeah.
But as I say, they really need at least, one win in the autumn series before they head into that Six Nations, I think.
Definitely need more consistency as well, because every time we go into the Six Nations, I think could be second, could possibly be first, might just as easily be last. Don't know how they're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. Consistency over the tournament, but also over the 80 minutes of a match. I think getting that 80-minute performance is a struggle. And, the same can be said of England Rugby League. That in this tournament, they've been magical at times. But probably the only really complete performance they put in was the first group match against Samoa. In the quarterfinal against Papua New Guinea, the first half was as good a performance as I've ever seen from an England side. They were absolutely unplayable. Papua New Guinea didn't look like they did not know what had hit them. But in the second half, it just devolved into stodge.
The differences between England's two matches against Samoa were what?
Well, in terms of the points turnaround, we've gone from 60 points to 6 in England's favour to 27-26. And the big difference is, I think there are two key factors. I said before the tournament started in that first group match, I fancied England to nick it. I did not fancy 10 tries to 1, but I fancied England to nick it because Samoa were underdone, because they'd just arrived in the country. They hadn't had the preparation. That was definitely a factor. But the other factor is I think England had not had any adversity in this tournament, whereas Samoa had to pick themselves up after a humbling, get on with it, which they did, and then come through a really tough quarterfinal against Tonga, 20 points to 18, a real proper grind. And I just think that having faced that adversity, they were in a much more battle-hardened situation than England, who had really had it pretty much their own way from minute 1 of game 1.
The spanking pulled them together.
I think so, yeah. I think they did not want to go home to Samoa with that, the abiding memory. Now, win or lose on Saturday, they go home as heroes because they've got to a World Cup final, which has never happened for Samoa before.
And
now, I hope they beat Australia. Obviously, I can't see it happening, but they'll give it a dig.
As a neutral, I'm very pleased to see Samoa in a World Cup final. It's another nation that outside the traditional big nations.
Yeah, it's the first time since the very first World Cup in 1954 that the final will feature a team other than England / Great Britain, New Zealand and Australia. It was only that very first one in 1954, Great Britain against France, was the only other time that a team outside that big three has reached the final.
When New Zealand first reached the final, how long did it take them to kick on afterwards?
I think their first final was 1988. And then they had semi-final. Yeah, it's hard to tell because the format of the tournament kept changing. The 88 competition and the 1992 one, it wasn't the situation that we have with a traditional World Cup now, where we have groups and a knockout stage. It was more like a league played over a few years, with the top 2 teams playing a final at the end of that. But of course, they got back to the final in the 2000 World Cup. Then there wasn't a World Cup after that for a good long time, and they won it in 2008. So 20 years from their first final to victory. And since then, they've had another final that they lost in 2013. But out at the semis this time around to Australia in what has to go down as one of the best World Cup matches I've ever seen, I have to say. And that just shows you how awesome Australia are, because Jonathan Davies said 30 minutes into that match, he'd never seen anyone dominate Australia the way the Kiwis had done so for the first 30 minutes of that game. They were 2 points ahead. It's
Wow.
like you take it to them, you do everything absolutely right. In fact, no, sorry, they were 2 points behind. And then they scored another try to go in front. But Australia had 2 chances. One of them wasn't even a chance, really, and scored 2 tries.
That sounds like them.
Yeah. So yeah, all to do for Samoa. But the one thing with Samoa is 7 of their players played in the NRL Grand Final. Those guys are playing the best Australians on an even level every week in their home league. I don't think they're not going to be intimidated by the prospect of seeing that. They're not going to look across the field and see a bunch of legendary superheroes. They're going to see the guys that they play alongside and against every single week of this regular season. So they'll give it a dig.
Yeah. And with regards to coming from a union side of things, gotta wonder what the Samoans reaching the finals and this is going to mean for rugby in general in Samoa. Will this lead to a shift in the balance from union towards league in the aspirations of the young Samoans?
Well, you've got to wonder, haven't you? As you say, will young Samoan players now be thinking rugby league is the game for me? Looking at those exploits, and I think the same is probably true over the last few years of Tonga as well. Even in Fiji, I remember in the 2017 World Cup, Fiji got to, no, sorry, not the 2017, going all the way back to 2008. Sorry, the first time they reached the semi-final, the first of 3 times in a row, and the purchase of cable subscriptions in Fiji had rocketed because the team had gone deep into the tournament. And again, Fiji, outside of Sevens Rugby Union, had never been in the business end of a tournament like that before. I don't know that it will necessarily. The good thing is for rugby players, of course, for if you're a 15-year-old playing rugby, you can play rugby league and rugby union. There's nothing to stop you doing both of them. And then maybe just sort of picking the path that emerges as and when it comes. I remember John Malomu played rugby league when he was a teenager in New Zealand before he became the worldwide phenomenon that we knew him as later. So I think although we've pointed out many times the differences between the two games and how difficult it is to just transition seamlessly, it's also true they're similar enough that you can carry on both at once for a while, I think, especially as a youngster.
Yeah. I think it's as you get to the higher levels that the specializations maybe become less reversible, and you have to get more and more focused on the individual role.
Yeah, absolutely. At some point, you're going to have to make a choice, but I think, and I think it's probably useful to have a go at both as well for the development of a lot of young players. You're going to pick up different approaches that might if rugby union ends up being your game, you might still be improved a little bit by having a bit of experience of rugby league or vice versa, because you'll have had different coaches, picked up different ways of doing things.
I think in many ways the defensive patterns are converging slightly with you get a lot of rugby league defensive coordinators still.
Yeah, it's true.
Coaches, I should say.
You know what's interesting about that, of course, England just appointed Brett Hodgson, who until recently was coaching Hull in Super League, as their defence coach. And what I found funny about that was it's that tradition, as you say, of bringing in rugby league coaches for defensive coaching roles. But he was a fullback in his playing days and a really good attacking fullback at that.
Were Hull an attacking team under him?
No, I don't think they were.
An attacking team?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think they were particularly necessarily the ultimate entertainers, but I just thought it was interesting that you kind of have this idea that maybe you'd pick up forwards from rugby league as defence coaches, but
or at least centres.
yeah, a player like Brett Hodgson, you'd think, oh yeah, you'd want him to coach your attacking side. He was such a good runner and passer of the ball, but who knows? I obviously he had to be the last line of defence as well, being a fullback.
They better know how to tackle.
Yeah, indeed, and he was good at that. So, but yeah, it's interesting, and of course that follows. He takes over from Anthony Seibold, who was a rugby league prop forward, who's now gone back to rugby league for a gig coaching in the NRL. So Eddie Jones obviously clearly likes having a rugby league person as his defensive coach.
Yeah.
Whether that's just for tackling or, as you say, for just more about lines and shape as well. I don't know.
Mentioning Eddie Jones, and we can sort of segue from there into other Australians who have faced unexpected defeat.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the Italian rugby union side must be turning cartwheels.
It's very probably the best possible thing that could happen for the Italy team right now.
Yeah.
All the doubts about do they deserve their place in the Six Nations, they can now turn around when we just beat Australia. Get stuff.
Exactly. They have beaten the Wallabies, and yeah, as an individual result, it'll live with the players forever. They'll be able to dine out on that for ages. But as you said, I think we were getting to a stage where people were seriously questioning the value of having Italy in the Six Nations, weren't we? Because
people were looking at Georgia and Romania as potential replacements for them.
Yeah, we're thinking it's been 20 years and still perennial wooden spooners, still never beaten England, still calling it a good campaign if you pick up a win in the Six Nations. Though they have had some great days as well, of course. A couple of fantastic victories over France leap to mind, but this one they'll take this into this coming Six Nations as a big thing. They'll, as you say, it'll do wonders for their belief.
They'll look at Scotland and say, "We beat the guys that beat them."
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's got to do wonders for them in terms of media profile and things like that. I imagine the result must have got a few more headlines than they normally get in the Gazzetta dello Sport. Perhaps who knows? But you'd think so, wouldn't you? People would be getting excited about that.
Maybe people who only look at Italy in the Six Nations will look at them and go, "Oh, there's life in the team and life beyond this tournament."
Yeah, exactly. And we're not far off another World Cup, are we? So
if Italy can have a decent Six Nations, one maybe two wins,
yeah,
it's got to be what they're looking for.
Yeah, I would say if I'm the Italian coach, I'm going in targeting fourth place or better.
Yeah.
So if we can definitely avoid the wooden spoon, but if we can be, up ahead of a couple of teams out of that'd be a hell of a thing to take into the next World Cup.
At that point, that's the dream situation almost for them.
Yeah.
And they've got to think now. We turned over Australia. On our day, we'll beat anyone.
Yeah, exactly. We can be as as mean as we like about saying this isn't the greatest Australia side ever. That it doesn't change the fact they have a victory over the Wallabies, and as you say, that will give them confidence whoever else they're facing. Yeah, fantastic, great result, and great result for the game generally. Not a great result for Australia, a great result for everybody else in rugby.
But at the same time, for all those who wear white with a red rose, it's kind of funny as well.
Yeah, indeed. Funnily enough, watching the Australia-New Zealand Rugby League semi-final the other night, the commentator at one point said about how great this was for the neutrals who didn't have a vested interest. And mate, there's not a single neutral involved. You're either Australian or you're supporting New Zealand. There is not a single person who says, "I don't mind."
No, I just want a good game.
Yeah.
I just want to see the Aussies get stuffed.
Exactly. 11 times they've won this Rugby League World Cup. Nobody wants to see a 12th unless they're Australian. And that's no disrespect to them. It's just, it's a testament to how good they are. But,
I'd love to have seen a New Zealand Samoa final.
oh, it would have been fantastic. I mean, the spine-tingling moment in the quarterfinal when Samoa and Tonga faced off, did their traditional, the Civitao against the Sipitao. And the Joseph Paulo, the Samoa captain, said he had a quick word with Jason Taumalolo, the Tonga captain, beforehand. They were talking about who should go first, and he said, "I just floated the idea. Why don't we do them together?" Yeah, and that's what they did, and it's awesome. You think would have been great to see that with the New Zealand hacker as well.
Oh yeah.
In fact, speaking of that, though, what Rugby League has to do now is actually make sure they follow up this World Cup instead of just abandoning the international game again till the next World Cup comes around.
It's what we say every time this comes around. They need to build on the interest in international rugby. They need to raise the profile of it. And go, look, this is important.
Yeah, they've got five, 6 good teams. Never had that before. We've got, yes, Australia are on a different level, and even New Zealand have to go to another gear to be competitive with them. But we've seen that they can compete. It was 2 points between them in the semi-final on Friday night. It was 6-0 when Australia beat England in the last World Cup final. Now you've got Tonga and Samoa added to that, and you've got Fiji and Papua New Guinea who can give those sides a game as well. And you think the only real big problem from an England perspective is all those sides are in the Southern Hemisphere. There's no competition for England in the Northern Hemisphere. It makes it very difficult. But what I would love to see next season is the 4 nations brought back, because that was good. We kept doing it each time with Australia, New Zealand, England, and one other. Yeah. Whoever did best. Sometimes once it was Samoa, once it was Scotland, once it was France.
Well, no one's doing 5 nations anymore.
Yeah, they could go for 5. Why not? Scotland, of course, got the best victory, the best result ever in their history in rugby league in that tournament when they drew with New Zealand. I think it was a great tournament. It gave, and the thing I would say is, and I think the reason they stopped doing it is because there's not always the appetite in Australia, and I think there's an attitude of like, well, Australia are the best, and if they're not there, it's not worth doing it. But I would say no. I would say England, Samoa, Australia, New Zealand. That's our World Cup semi-finalists. We do that the 4 nations. But if Australia say, no, we don't want to take part, we're too busy, it's too much on the calendar, whatever, say, fair enough. Just bring in Tonga or Fiji or Papua New Guinea, one of them, and do the tournament anyway. It'll still be great. It'll be a load of great matches. Maybe the winners of that tournament can play Australia in a test series the year after or something.
And that one, England and New Zealand probably the favourites, but just the exposure will develop the other 2 nations that are involved.
Yeah. I think anyone who was at the match on Saturday would be happy to see Samoa and England go at it again. It's. I think it'll be criminal if they fail to take this opportunity again. Every single time they do a World Cup, there's a bump of interest that is frittered away within months.
Cynic, and he says, I'm sure they'll find a way to screw it up because the rugby league generally does.
Exactly. I hope you're wrong, but I'm sure you're right. But as you said, who knows? 3 years' time in France, we'll be doing another World Cup and we'll say exactly the same things.
Yeah. Speaking of minnows in World Cups, I'm reminded we've got the playoff game coming up for World Cup qualification in the Union between the mighty forces of the USA and Portugal. And before I saw that, I wasn't even sure that Portugal played rugby. I'd heard of the Spanish side, but I hadn't heard that the Portuguese played as well.
Yeah, we've seen Spain in the World Cup before, haven't we? But I don't recall ever seeing Portugal. So USA we've seen in a couple of World Cups as well. Yeah, I mean it's great stuff. Let's hope it it inspires a few people to pick up an oval ball and keep growing the game.
Yeah, I no disrespect to the America, and whilst it would be great to get Major League Rugby happening, I'd like to see a new face in the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen what can happen. Decades ago, a couple of decades back, Japan was kind of a comical idea in rugby. Everyone said, Japan playing rugby? Now look at them.
And it was in the 80s, I remember seeing Argentina playing against England at Twickenham, and the score was 60 odd in England's favour.
Yeah.
And now they're regularly competing with Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Just beat New Zealand in New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly. They've become a serious force. They've been a serious force for a while now.
As shown by the victory over England as well.
Yeah, exactly. Michael Checker there getting, he's pulling his double duty, and he's gonna go back from this tour very, very pleased. I think he's steered Lebanon to a second consecutive quarter-final in Rugby League, and picked up a victory over England at Twickenham in Rugby Union within a matter of days.
Great little holiday.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be very pleased with himself, and rightly so. But one thing, of course, one of the things that you and I are really interested in, and we've already looked at it many times, is those points of difference and similarity between the two codes of rugby. We love players who cross over. We love to speculate about players who could have crossed over. One question I was asked at the match on Saturday, which I found interesting because it's something you and I have talked about a lot, is a rugby union fan, Tom, at the Emirates Stadium, asked me, why do rugby league kickers not more aggressive in going for distance when they kick for touch after a penalty? And I said to him, it's an interesting point. It's not something that we've debated many times, because what you're talking about is a kick out of hand into touch on the full. You don't have to bounce. You're not looking. You're literally getting free territory. And really, although you'll often hear commentators on games talk about being 30 or 40 yards upfield, the truth is they usually kick about 10 meters.
Yeah.
The
40-20 is criminally underused in league. I don't know why they don't go for it more often, because that is even more free territory for you, and I believe you get the ball back.
Exactly. You kick, for those who don't know, the 40-20 rule has not been in rugby league that long. It's going back a few years now, but when you kick the ball from within 40 meters of your own try line, and you can get it into touch within 20 meters of the opponent's try line, and it does have to bounce there. It's not, you can't kick out on the full. That's so it's a bounce into touch. So it's not an easy kick, but still, you then get the ball back in the opponent's 20 with a new set of 6 tackles. So it takes you from a defensive position into a really dangerous attacking position. And as you say, why don't we see people go for it more? We've got, I think,
Union
a 40-20 specialist is someone who kicks 2 or 3 of them in a season.
Whereas rugby union fullbacks and fly halves be licking their lips going, let's get that done.
Definitely. And they've made it even easier in the last couple of years, because we've also added the 20-40, which is exactly the same thing. As you can imagine, it's just kick from within your own 20 to the opponent's 40. But the rule works the same way. You get the ball back. and you turn a really dangerous defensive position into a good attacking position. I think of some of the fly halves I've watched play for for England in rugby union over the years. Someone like Paul Grayson or Rob Andrew. This is going
all
back
day long.
donkey's years. They would flog the 40-20 rule. They'd be kicking one every week, no question, and sometimes two or three. Jonathan Davies, who of course knows as much as anyone about playing rugby union and rugby league at the top level and kicking a ball, said just a couple of weeks ago in this World Cup that he thought it was a really underused tactic and that rugby union players would take much more advantage of it.
Now, I'm sure we would welcome any comments from people who want to suggest reasons why this might be. But the only thing I don't think we've really been able to come up with is that the risk is too great of missing touch.
Yeah, I think certainly in terms of kicking the penalties, I think when you've got a penalty, you're guaranteed another set of 6 tackles, even if you don't kick out at all and you just play from where the offence took place, which you can do. So you've got possession guaranteed for another set. If you miss touch, the opponents have got that possession. They've caught the ball, and you do see that happen sometimes. People do go a little bit longer, and they get caught out, and they get absolutely pilloried by coaches, commentators, and fans who are like, the one mistake you cannot make is missing touch from the penalty.
If you're kicking really deep, though, if you miss the touch, they should still be starting their set of 6 way back in their territory.
That is true. You're still pinning them back. If you back your own defence, you can look at it saying, right, we're going to take this penalty. We're going to have a great attacking platform. But if I miss touch, we're going to run up there as fast as we can. We're going to hammer them, and we're going to keep them, and we're just going to keep them trapped in their own end as long as possible.
Yeah. Let them attack from their own 20. See where that gets.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it is something that we could see more of. But as you say, anyone else has any thoughts on why that happens? Because it's obviously a major tactic. There's nobody in rugby league who said, no, actually, I'm going to challenge this paradigm and I am going to start kicking 40 meters every time instead of 10 and see what happens. But you think maybe it could shift?
Yeah. If someone does kick deep in a game, do you get the commentators going, "Oh, that's a bit risky, that," but he's come out with a great kick?
Yeah, not generally. That's the thing. I think usually when someone, as I say, it'll depend. If they miss touch, they'll get hammered for it. But if it gets in, nobody will be saying, "Oh, he took a risk there." They'll be saying, "What a great kick." So, I think some guys who've got a big boot on them, you think, why not? Why not even just an extra 10 meters? You don't have to absolutely go for broke and say I'm hammering it 40, 50 meters. I'll just go for 20. But it's still a big extra.
When I saw the 40-20 come in, I thought that's a gift to the Union convert.
Yeah.
They're going to lap that up, and yet hasn't seemed to have taken.
I think maybe in that sense it's just it would have been interesting if that rule had come in the 90s when there were lots more Union converts in rugby league, when the likes of Jonathan Davies were playing, and think how would they have used it, and how would that have then changed the tactical development of the game from that point onwards? But
who is league's best kicker out of hand by reputation?
Well, I suppose the thing is that most of the best kickers I can think of, certainly in the English game, people like Johnny Lomax at St Helens and George Williams at Warrington, they're mostly noted for their short kicking game. They're attacking kicks within 20, 30 meters. Yeah, chips over the top, grubber kicks into the in-goal area, crossfield kicks in attacking positions. There's not many people who are really I suppose Mark Sneed at Salford at the moment. I'd say, yeah, probably he's somebody who's noted for one of the best all-round tactical kicking games. Of course, he was in the England squad in this World Cup, but didn't feature a lot. And you think, maybe it would have been worth having him in the team against Samoa just to offer something different.
So there's not anyone who's known there's no equivalent of Stuart Hogg who's known for having a booming great kick downfield.
No, I think the last sort of guys that I can remember like that would be Pat Richards when he was playing for Wigan. Had a monstrous kick. It was well known. When Wigan were forced to drop out under their own posts because the opponents had tackled them in goal or something, where normally you're thinking the dropout will come, you'll catch it roughly, sort of between 40 meters and halfway, and have a good attacking position, and he would frequently kick it 60, 70 meters, so the opponents instead would be coming from more or less where they'd expect to start a normal set of six. Andy Farrell, of course, when he was playing, had a big boot on him. He was known for it, but yeah, it's not something that's hugely prized, I think, at the moment in rugby league, and maybe it is something that people might want to look at, is just spending a little bit more time on the long kicking. Lee Breers, when he played for Warrington, he was one of those guys who would pinch a 40-20 more often than the average guy, but he had that impish quality about him that he would go for stuff that other players wouldn't go for. He would go for drop goals when other people wouldn't. He would go for chips over the top, and he was just unpredictable, and he backed his own ability a lot.
I'd be intrigued to see the statistics for 40-20, see what the conversion rate is like of attempts to success.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone's got those sorts of stats. Maybe the RFL keep a record of them. As you say, it'd be very interesting to see. But I don't think people even go for them that often. I mean, you'll hear the referee every time someone kicks, saying 40 if they're inside the 40. And you hear that a lot, but you'd think, yeah, he's in the 40, but he's not actually going for a 40-20.
It's almost like they're going, come on then, son, give it a go.
Yeah, exactly. It's mostly for a long kick out of your own half, you're just looking to try and split the winger and the fullback and find terra firma without kicking the ball directly out.
Do you also get a shout of 20?
No, not that I've heard, not yet anyway. But maybe it's just because it's new, it's too new, and I haven't picked up on it yet.
I would have thought if you're shouting 40, you should be shouting 20 as well. Actually, remind people of the new rule.
Yeah, definitely. But perhaps they do, and as I say, I just haven't picked up on it yet. But it's an interesting point, and one, as I say, you think there could be tactics that are being missed out on there that maybe people could say we could go for that a bit more, and we with a really good specialist kicker in the team, that might just take a bit of pressure off your forwards. If you just think, what, we can buy some land via a good long kick, when we're struggling.
And there's nothing forwards like more than turning around and going forward.
Yeah. We shall see. Things do tend to get tried at some point. Tactically, somebody will go for it, but as I say, the dominant paradigm seems to be that long kicks are they're just what you do when you're struggling, and it's not something that you really concentrate on as a weapon.
Is it almost a kind of weakness?
Yeah, I think maybe coaches they're not dwelling on how do we get out. How does our kicking game get us out of a tight spot? They're focusing on how do we not get in that tight spot in the first place. But you can't always control that. If you're being flogged in the forwards and being kept in your own half, then it would be helpful to have a good long kicker in the team.
Definitely.
The other thing, I suppose, is maybe I've noticed a lot is teams straying offside from the kickoff a lot. from the kick, sorry, not the kickoff, so often that you think that they don't think it's that big a deal. You know, that you get to the fifth tackle, the ball goes out to the kicker, and half of his players are stood in front of him as he kicks the ball, which means they have to give the opponent 10 meters when he catches it before.
Can he play them onside by running past them?
Yeah, the kicker can play them onside by following through on his own kick, and if he gets ahead of anyone, he plays them back onside. But it's interesting to me because often they're only a meter or two in front, and I just think surely it would make more sense to keep everyone onside and then chase that kick like like your life depends on it.
And rugby union certainly discovered the virtues of a good kick chase and the pressure you can put on the guy receiving the ball.
Yeah.
Pressure them into a mistake. Suddenly you've got yourself another set of 6.
Yeah.
Make them drop the ball. Knock on. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Another set of 6 in good territory. And psychologically, it's just like the 40-20. It's a hammer blow to the other team, isn't it? Because they go from expecting to have a set of 6 themselves to get an opportunity to cart the ball up to suddenly finding themselves defending in a bad position. It's a tough one to take mentally sometimes. So, with that said, I think maybe it's time to have a look at a great try. You asked me in our last episode.
The last thing, actually, so before we do that, we have to have a shout out to the Ladies' Cup final.
Yes, we do. You're quite right. It would be remiss to forget one of the all-time great women's rugby matches, as England took on New Zealand in New Zealand on Saturday morning, that World Cup final, and came agonisingly close. 34-31. Heartbreaking stuff. And to have a woman sent off in the 18th minute and still lead for most of the match and come so close to beating New Zealand in their own backyard, it's a heroic effort.
We should probably describe them as favourites, New Zealand, in this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The form they've been on going into this World Cup. I know England were on that long and growing run of Test match victories. I think that was 30 by the end, wasn't it? 30 consecutive victories. But if ever you were thinking anyone was going to take that record away, it was going to be New Zealand, who have just gone from strength to strength in the women's game. And put on a huge crowd for this. You know, you're filling Eden Park. It's outstanding.
Yeah, that's an amazing achievement just of itself.
Yeah, and it shows that people can. If anyone was still uncertain about women's rugby, you know for a fact it's not a sideshow. It's not an afterthought. It's it's an elite sport
in its own right. It is the real deal.
Exactly. And there's some great players around. People, obviously, I have the bias towards England being an England fan. And, Emily Scarratt is probably going to be my pick as favourite player at the moment. But I think I was talking to a colleague of mine today in my day job. She's a big rugby union fan from a family of big rugby union fans, and she said if I was picking up, if I was a schoolgirl now, I'd be so inspired to play rugby. And they say, if you can see it, you can be it. And young girls today can definitely see it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great stuff. Heartbreaking for England. I really, really wanted them to do it. But for the game as a whole, it's just, it just keeps going from strength to strength. And hopefully, I would like to see the same thing happen in Women's Rugby League, which is a good, I would say, a good decade or more behind Women's Rugby Union in its development, but again, is growing. This World Cup
I would suggest that Women's Rugby League have the opportunity, though, to get in at the ground level with an international series. that's representative and important.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the stories are fantastic. Brazil, one of my favourite stories of the Rugby League World Cup. The Brazil women have come over. Yeah, they've lost every match they've played. So what? Although they damn near beat Canada in the in the last group game, and that was a fantastic match. But we're talking about women there who taken 27-hour bus rides to play a game of rugby in their own country, coming over and being part of a World Cup. The Papua New Guinea women, the Orchids, they were saying a few years ago they were playing their first game and they actually had to run off the pitch at the end as people were throwing stuff at them because, what is basically quite a chauvinistic society. People didn't want to see women playing as top sports people, but they've been winning people over, and now that the game is growing there. And this World Cup will have helped them. They've picked up a couple of wins, got to the semi-finals, got battered by Australia, but hey, that's Australia. They won't mind too much because they got to the semi-final, and that's something to build on. Yeah, I hope it can continue to grow, and as you say, maybe they can really, really go for the international game, and keep that up. I'm also hoping that some of those players from those smaller nations like Brazil or Canada can pick up contracts on the back of this in the Women's Super League here or in the Women's National Rugby League in Australia, and then take that back to their own countries. That
any players from the minor nations that you saw that made you think they look decent?
Oh, the winger from Brazil, what's her name? Edna something. I can't remember her surname. She scored an absolute belter of a try against Canada. It was her second try of the tournament, and when tries were few and far between for Brazil in this tournament, but she picked it up just in front of her own 10-meter line. She saw the pass coming out, plucked the intercept out of the air, and went the length of the field. And she's only little. She's quite short, and I was honestly thinking she's not going to make it. She hasn't got the legs. But as the fullback came in on her, she just veered off to the side, and then no, she is going to make it. She's got the legs, belting. I thought I would love to see her playing for a professional or a semi-professional club in the next couple of years, and there were others, but yeah.
Don't know the first one that springs to mind. But.
Yeah, I mean, give them the opportunity, and then, as I say, then she'll go back to her national team for internationals. She'll be taking what she's learned, playing at a high level with her. That gets passed on to everybody. It would be fantastic, and I know that some of those players in those smaller nations were looking to do that, say this is our chance to get ourselves in the shop window, and hopefully move things on another level for the game. So, as I say, in the meantime, let's have a look at a try, because you challenged me last time to come up with a rugby league try of similar stature to the great Barbarians try we watched last time. Probably the try of all time, that Gareth Edwards scored. And I'm not sure, as I say, that there is quite a try, but for an iconic moment, I was able to pick one out that every rugby league fan who's seen this remembers it. It's the iconic try. It's the iconic commentary. I'm going to share my screen and we'll have a look at this one. So here we are. Bradford are winning 11-10 in a playoff semi-final. It's the last moment. Can he play the ball before the hooter goes? He does.
Ball is live, and now it has to be kept live. got to appreciate the offload. He had a bit of gas, that man.
Matthew Elliott, the Bradford coach, falls off his chair in disbelief as St Helens snatch from the dead.
They look somewhat chuffed.
Yeah, absolutely outstanding. You know, you can tell how great that moment was in that I'm a Wigan fan. And that's St Helens, that's their big moment. But I don't think you can possibly be a rugby league fan and not find that absolutely amazing. And that is the moment that gave gave life to the tag that followed for years, that never write off the Saints. Eddie Hemmings, the commentator there, with his call of "it's wide to west, it's wide to west." Everything it said for years afterwards, you never write off the Saints, and that was the moment they were, as I say, the game was over. Bradford had won it with the drop goal. It was 11-10, but
immortality beckoned.
Yeah, one more tackle and that was it, and it was finished. But somehow they kept that ball alive and found the break. Sean Long got so excited that he grabbed the St Bernard's head off the St Helens mascot, walked around the pitch, and had to be basically physically dragged back to take the conversion. He was that excited.
We're done. It's won.
Yeah, and the conversion, let's face it, didn't matter. It was a knockout game. And 14-11, 16-11, who cares? He kicked it, though.
Get it, kid.
So, yeah, there you go. Wide to west is probably the most iconic rugby league try I can think of, certainly in the Super League era in Britain. It's just one of those moments that it's TV gold. You couldn't really. I remember watching the match at the first time, and even though I wanted Bradford to win, I couldn't help but say, "Yeah, good for you, Saints."
There was one try I remember picking from the past in league. They Martin a fire down the sidelines on a long range run. I cannot remember any more context than that. I think it may have been a cup final.
Yeah, I think the one you're thinking of, I'm sure we'll have a look at it in an episode not too far away. Challenge Cup final, Wigan against Leeds. The try that was so good that they put a statue up at Wembley for him. You know, it's that the memorable moment as he sinks to his knees in the in goal area, having just scored the try, and it was an absolute belter. And there's another one he scored very similar against New Zealand in the Test series in 1989, which I think doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, to be honest. We'll definitely have a look at that one. But again, one where he picked up the ball deep in his own half and just went for it, and showed what he can do as the greatest English try scorer in rugby league history. And that's not just an opinion, it's the fact that he's scored more tries than any other English player ever.
I'm still trying to find the copy of the Ian Bolshaw try for Bath, I think it was, where he took it from the kickoff straight back to the house.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. If you can find it, we'll definitely be watching that one.
I've found an 80-metre try for Bolshaw where he just ran straight through the French, but I haven't found the one for Bath yet. I'm going to keep looking.
Yeah, he could shift a bit. He was rapid, and there was one recently in that World Cup semi-final, which from Friday night, which we'll definitely have a look at. Josh Addo-Carr, the fastest man in the NRL at the moment, turned nothing into a try. We'll have to see that.
And speaking of speed merchants, one thing I did come across that we probably need to look at is Jeff Wilson getting stopped by George Gregan in the dying moments to secure a win for Australia.
Yeah, and
Denied over the goal line.
And that's a lovely segue as it brings us into the jukebox and a look at a big tackle. And it's a lovely segue because of George Gregan, but it's not one that he'll want to remember. This is from the 2003 Rugby World Cup. That's Mike Tintle just picks him up and carries him into touch.
You're mine. Borderline spear at the end there, but I think he got him down safe.
Yes, indeed. Let's just close that.
Scoring quite high on the George North scale.
Yeah, I think it's not a great hit in the ones that we've looked at recently from Josh Lucy and Tommy Luluai. It's a big man on a smaller man and everything, but it's just, what makes me laugh about it the most is the fact that other England players are coming in and pushing Gregan like there's any need whatsoever to add any kind of impetus to this.
He's got no purchase, he's got no chance, but you're all going to drive him into touch anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They just want to be included, I think.
I want a piece of the little bastard.
Yeah. And to be fair, George Gregan had been a thorn in the sides of many England players over the years because he was a cracking player.
He was quality.
Yeah, but yeah, that's one of the big moments of the biggest World Cup for England fans, 2003.
Very much
yeah. Lives long in the memory, and what we mostly remember as England fans is Jason Robinson and Johnny Wilkinson with the decisive scores in the final, of course. But it's good to remember moments like that as well.
HRH Mike Tyndall.
Yeah, indeed. So that's great stuff. And as always, if anybody out there has a try that they'd like us to look at or a big hit they'd like us to look at, just let us know, because we are always up for having a look at something like that. It's what we enjoy.
Definitely.
So I think really that probably leads us towards the end of our time. We've got a couple of World Cup finals coming up. Of course, the Men's Rugby League World Cup final, as we know, is Australia versus Samoa. That's coming up on Saturday at Old Trafford. It's going to be an almighty task for Samoa, but they will not be awed or daunted. Let's face it, every one of them knows if they win that match, they write their own ticket for the rest of their lives.
Definitely.
So let's just hope they can do it. We have the Women's World Cup final taking place on the same day, and that's going to be great for the visibility of Women's Rugby League, as we were just talking about. It's it needs to grow. Well, that's going to be a double header at Old Trafford on Saturday, so they're going to have the biggest stage that Women's Rugby League has ever had in that match, and it's going to be, as we've just found out this evening, Australia and New Zealand in that match, which is, I'm disappointed for England that they couldn't make it, but I'm not surprised, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. They've lost 20 points to 6 tonight against New Zealand. In the last World Cup in 2017, they went out to New Zealand in the semi-final, but New Zealand put 52 points on them.
That represents progress then.
Exactly. England, unlike most of the players in the New Zealand team and all the players in the Australian team, England's women are not fully professional. They are working jobs. In some cases, they're working 2 jobs in the week and trying to play rugby when they can. They've said many times they hoped to win this World Cup in an effort to change that, to make the game, to give the impetus to go professional. I think while I support that goal, unfortunately, I think the only way they're going to win a World Cup is when they've already gone professional. They have to have that backing to meet the Australians and the New Zealanders on their own terms.
It's the next step, how to get to the next level.
Yeah, and we've seen with England, with the Roses in women's rugby, England went fully professional. They contracted their players a couple of years ago. They pointed the way. It's worked for them. Let's hope it can happen in rugby league and work the same way. Because there are some cracking players there and they deserve those opportunities. They've done well. They've made progress. They are definitely a better team than they were 5 years ago. And the game is growing over here. So good for them. And finally, and perhaps the most mouth-watering match of the lot, Friday night, the wheelchair World Cup final, England against France. They're the two biggest nations in wheelchair rugby league. It's the final everybody wanted to see. And I think I said at the outset that was England's best chance of winning one of these World Cups was in the wheelchair game. I still think France have been so good in this tournament. It's going to be a huge achievement if England can beat them. But I just keep reminding myself the last time England and France played last year, England won. So that can happen. And I think wheelchair rugby league has been the biggest winner of all out of this World Cup. I think before this World Cup, nobody knew about it who wasn't already in the inner circle.
Wouldn't have known it existed before this year.
Exactly. Now they've had all this coverage on the BBC. They've had 3,000 odd fans in back-to-back games in the Copper Box. It's just to put them on another profile. And everyone who's seen it has seen an outstanding sporting occasion. I was at the Copper Box for England's match against Spain and Ireland against Australia. Honestly, the television doesn't do it justice. The sound of the impacts when two guys go into each other at full pelt on those chairs is like gunshots going off in the arena. They whack into each other, they get knocked to the floor, they just flip their chair back up and get on with it. The skill level is something to behold. And rugby league just translates really well to wheelchair. They've said all along, it's just rugby league in wheelchairs, and it's true. There's virtually no rule changes because hardly any of them are needed. All it is it's 5-a-side on a smaller indoor pitch.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's fantastic, and I really hope that they can build on that. And physical disability rugby league got its run out, and England did win that World Cup. And again, it's something else when you see a guy with one arm catching a ball and running with it at pace. You think that's quite impressive. I hope all of these things get built on and continue to make that progress to the next World Cup and to the ones beyond that. There's more wheelchair teams than ever, and after this World Cup, there should be a lot more because the Rugby League World Cup Development Fund have told those chairs are expensive. You know, a top end sports chair costs about £5,000, but they've told towns who want a team, the money's there, we'll buy the kit for you. So the opportunity is there for us to grow. More and more teams are springing up. Wigan, I was happy to see we started our wheelchair team up this season just gone. I would love to see next season or the season after every single Super League team having its own women's team and wheelchair team alongside the men's teams.
Does the Wigan team play in the cherry and white hoops?
Oh, absolutely. You better believe it.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, all in all, it's been a great few weeks to be a rugby fan. You know, we may not always get the results we want, but we've seen some fantastic rugby, some great upsets and big results in both codes, and it's only going to keep going. We've got more, as I say, World Cup finals this week. We've got the last week of the autumn internationals, and we'll only have a few months, really just weeks to wait after that before the Six Nations starts up, and a new Super League season starts up in rugby league with a World Club Challenge, which hasn't run for a couple of years thanks to COVID. St Helens will be going down under to take on Penrith in the biggest club game.
Good stuff.
So great to see that back. And I really do wish, I really want to say, I can't do it. I'm trying to wish St Helens good luck in that match.
You want a British win?
I'll content myself by saying I don't wish St Helens bad luck in the game against Penrith. I think I can manage that. But all joking aside, yes, I want a British win, definitely. But they'll have to go some to do it. They'll be in Australia, and Penrith. This Penrith side is, people are talking about it as once in a generation side. So who knows? But it's just great that game is back on. It should be taking place every season.
Even if you can't say it, I will. Best of luck to the St Helens team against Penrith.
Fair enough. On behalf of the Rugby Codebreakers, we'll see you all next time on the 1st of December. Have a great couple of weeks. Send us your questions, send us your suggestions, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be back again before you know it.
Thank you very much.